PropTech as a term didn't exist. Commercial real estate tech wasn't a thing. And everybody who I talked to was like, real estate, is that a big enough market? That was the feedback.
I still got that question in 2023 when I was first fundraising for this business.
We're trying to bring transparency into commercial real estate data through really granular data that's extremely hard to come by otherwise. What makes up a property? It's the leases within the property. It's the sales of that property, both current and historical. It's the property data within it. It's the loans on that property. Is it securitized? Is it in CMBS? That's valuable information to know. Our customers don't want answers with a black box supporting it.
Mm-hmm.
It is very important to them to have the granular data supporting those answers. I'd be interested to look at success rates for PropTech companies where the founders come from the real estate industry versus those that don't.
Real estate people, the way in which they make money is by sniffing out bullshit. People have just an immediate, visceral, negative reaction to someone who doesn't kind of speak their language.
I think about it like the late 90s saying, oh, we're going to do this thing on the internet. And it's like, no, every company's on the internet. You're not building the internet thing. It's embedded in what you do, right? AI, as we think about it today, and agents and LLMs are going to be embedded in everything. I wonder the most about the impact to junior level people in the industry.
Yes, it's definitely going to replace jobs. What I like to believe the future is, which is already true in real estate, right, is that means that everyone almost has their own mini empire in their business. All right. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Bricks, Bytes, and Bold Moves, the future of real estate. I'm Dr. Kate Jarvis, the CEO of Fifth Dimension, and I'm here today with Michael Mandel, who is the CEO and co-founder of CompStak. He's been in real estate himself, and he has also been involved in a lot of tech innovation and tech incubation. And now today, you're running a business where you are dealing with a lot of commercial lease comparables data and the many, many people who are interested in those data.
Yes.
So we're going to dig into a bit of your journey here today and some of the hot topics within AI and real estate and tech adoption within the real estate industry more generally. So thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So to get started here today, why real estate? What was the first spark of that love for the property industry?
That's a fair question. Well, for me, my interest or love, I guess, was entrepreneurship. I wanted to be an entrepreneur and wanted to start a company, and always sort of intended to. I went to college to study entrepreneurship, thought that's what I was going to do. And then when I was graduating from college, I was like, oh, shit, I don't have a business to start that I'm ready to like really take on at this point. So I went to go work with an entrepreneur actually in commercial music production, which I did for a year, which was very challenging industry.
Even more challenging than real estate, you might say. It's hard to compare apples to oranges.
Very different, but very challenging personalities to work with. It's difficult to work with creatives, I would say, So again, I still wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't have an idea I was ready to go run with. And so I thought about what I could do that was entrepreneurial. And I've always had sort of an interest in real estate. I always loved the tangibility of it. And I was in Manhattan and looking at all these huge, amazing buildings and thought, wow, it's a cool business to be in. And what's interesting about commercial real estate brokerage is it's an eat what you kill business, right? It's a commission-based gig where if you work really hard and you're successful, you can make an infinite amount of money. And you don't really answer to a boss in the traditional sense. And so that sort of was appealing to me from an entrepreneurial standpoint. But I always still thought I was going to start a business.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So you were looking to have autonomy. You were looking to drive your own career, choose your own fate. And how then did the idea for CompStak come about?
Well, I think, when I got into brokerage, I was always sort of looking at what I did from an opportunity seeking mindset and always trying to think about how this industry could be made better or what opportunities could I find in it. And there was no shortage of opportunities to find because it was such an antiquated industry. But I was working as a broker, and one of the things that every, office leasing broker would do in New York City, and I think in a lot of markets, was we would trade data. And in particular, we would have this Monday morning meeting where we'd all sit around a big boardroom table talking about deals. And in particular, leasing deals, because most of us were leasing brokers. And so I would be frantically calling other brokers that I knew on Sunday night, trying to get comps so that I could share other comps with them on recent lease deals to bring to my Monday morning meeting. And then in the Monday morning meeting, each person is writing down, notes on the deals that actually matter to them. Our head of research would be in the room typing in what he heard. But generally speaking, we were all trading random information for other random information. I was at the time representing, tech companies and creative firms, but most of the deals people were talking about in my office were like law firms and hedge funds and banks. And I'm like, these weren't relevant to the kind of deals and the kind of buildings that I was doing deals in. And I thought, we're all sharing this information. Why can't we all just put it in one consolidated database for the industry so that we can actually find what we're looking for when we're looking for it versus just trading random information for other random information? So the idea just came from that. It was like, how do you kind of move this antiquated offline process online and ideally make it better and more efficient in the process?
That's incredible. So was V0 of CompStak a giant spreadsheet?
Sort of, although we never circulated it. The idea was always sort of to put it online. But yeah, originally it was me reaching out to my network, getting whoever I knew to share comps with me and compiling it in a spreadsheet. And then, I was the first person loading data into CompStak. My co-founder, built the original kind of prototype for it. And I would compile a spreadsheet and get it all cleaned up and normalized and ready to go, and then send it to him, and he would, get it up on the site. So that was how it started. Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack there. You saw the need, you felt it yourself for these data to be readily available, and also for this sort of matchmaking process to work where you could give something and get something back in return that was actually relevant to the decision making that you needed to do and to earn your own commission. But surely you're interested long time in entrepreneurship. A lot goes into building a business.
Yeah.
So talk to me a bit about from when you had an idea, you knew you were going to solve this particular pain point, and then you had technology, you had a co-founder, you had employees, you had customers. How did that happen?
Well, I think I first had the idea in I was roughly fall of 2010. I actually had a bunch of different ideas, and I gave a presentation to my office, all the brokers, of all the inefficiencies I saw in commercial real estate and that I thought were just things I thought were stupid that we should fix.
All of them. That must have been, a 3-week process.
Yeah, it was a lot. There was a lot in the presentation. And then I was like, okay, which one would I actually want to pursue? And this was the one I decided to pursue. And then, I had actually tried to start this Facebook app a few years before that was kind of a disaster. But the big learning experience from that for me was that I realized that if I wanted to start something in tech, I needed a technical co-founder. Mm-hmm. And so I just started going to tech startup events every night of the week, trying to find somebody to build this business with. And that gave me an opportunity because every time I would go to these events, I'd pitch the idea and I'd get better at pitching it. And eventually I had multiple people that were, interested in doing this with me. And I ultimately met my co-founder Vadim at a Find a Co-founder event. And he was looking for a co-founder as well. And of course, I wasn't qualified to vet him technically, but I had a good sense about him just on a personal level. He seemed really smart, and he seemed just like a good guy and we kind of dated effectively, right? It was like, let's just see how we work together. Let's grab some coffees and some lunches and let's brainstorm ideas and think about this. And if it doesn't work out, we'll go our separate ways, but let's see where we go with this. And so he kind of built an initial prototype, in 2011. I was still working as a broker, at that time. Tried to raise some money, probably starting in June 2011. Zero success. Nobody was interested in it. At the time that PropTech as a term didn't exist. Yep. Commercial real estate tech wasn't a thing. And everybody who I talked to was like, real estate, is that a big enough market? That was the feedback.
I still got that question in 2023 when I was first fundraising for this business.
Yeah,
so you are investors of a different kind than I am used to in real estate.
Yeah. In fairness, look, there's not a lot of industries that can support vertical technologies as unicorn type businesses, but real estate is one of them that can. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that, a lot of investors recognized that at the time. And so that was a challenge. Another challenge was that I was still working as a broker. And I got a lot of feedback. Well, it's you're clearly not fully committed to this because you're still, working as a broker. And I'm like, well, give me a term sheet and I'll quit today. You know what I mean? Like unfortunately I wasn't independently wealthy and I needed to pay my rent and I needed to find a way to make money until I could, get this business off the ground. So that was a challenge. It took, ultimately, so we didn't launch until kind of beginning of 2012. We needed to show that we had traction and didn't raise our first penny until June of 2012. But at that point, we kind of had the pitch down and we had some traction. We had a lot of users, that were trading data on CompStak, and people saw that there was something there. But I mean, everybody was super skeptical at the beginning. People were like, nobody will ever do this, and including people in the industry who were trading data. They just couldn't see this as a path online. And it's all totally fair because frankly, building marketplace businesses is really hard. Think about like social networks. It's like there's Facebook, and then the other companies Facebook is bought, and then in the professional space there's LinkedIn, and that's it. It's hard to build network effect type businesses. So once you do, they're super defensible, but they're hard to build. So I don't blame people for thinking it was crazy, but
It sounds like that was motivating for you.
Look, I think that like as an entrepreneur, you're going to get mostly rejection, and you can go in two directions with that. You can be like, okay, you could listen to them and you could find it demotivating. You can give up, or you can let it fuel you to want to prove everybody wrong. You got to go one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've grown the business an enormous amount since then. So I think you've probably had some nice moments of remembering early conversations in the business.
For sure.
And doing a little bit of this, which is nice these days. Of course, mistakes were made along the way. But yeah, I guess some of those early days, first of all, there must have been potential co-founders that you rejected. You weren't only dating your future co-founder as you know him today. What were the criteria? So, you need someone you can get along with. You need someone who, therefore, you can build a trusted relationship. You think you can be in it together for the long haul. But talk to me about that mindset. And did your co-founder have an idea of the type of business idea that, because it sounds like you were the originator of thinking of CompStak. You had a personal investment in solving this pain point, and he's being then brought in to helping you solve that. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, there were other people I talked to. I felt like I needed to feel like who this person was truly believed in it and felt like they were going to be a partner and were really in it. And I got that sense from Vadim. Also, he was doing, he had built like, financial systems for banks and hedge funds and came from the finance space, and kind of inherently kind of saw the corollaries between the financial markets and tools used like Bloomberg and FactSet and things like that, and how they work with data and what happens in financial services and how that applies to real estate. So that made a lot of sense to him. And actually the funny thing is his wife works in commercial real estate finance, but he didn't talk to her about it. So he decided he was interested in it, but it wasn't until he basically decided he wanted to work with me that he told her, and she's like, oh, this is actually a good idea. But she's like, why didn't you tell me earlier? But, yeah. So, I mean, I guess I didn't get the same sense with other people in the same way. But I don't remember exactly the criteria at that point. I think it was more like a gut kind of feel.
Is that something you generally advise other people who are starting businesses to trust their gut feel?
I think so, but I question my gut often. I mean, there's certainly, when I look back at things in hindsight, there are decisions that I made based off of gut that I'm like, you know what, I made the wrong decision. And so then, or at least I think maybe I made the wrong decision. You don't really know because you never know the full implications of what that decision was. But I think that for the most part, I actually had a discussion with Vadim, my co-founder, about this. There was a major decision we were making recently, and I was recounting decisions that I had in the past looked back on that felt somewhat similar, where I felt like I made the wrong decision. And I said, like, I don't want to do that again. And his feedback was like, you have to operate by one playbook and one viewpoint. And so, like, be consistent. Like, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right, but like, decide the framework by which you want to evaluate things and try and stay true to it, because there's lots of things that have gone right because of it. And so that I went with his guidance on that. I mean, it was a decision we obviously made together, but I think I was questioning it more than him.
Yeah, fair enough. I think sometimes we want to change the methodology by which we analyze data, the decision-making framework that we have, but then that sort of throws into question our understanding of everything that's come before that, right? Yeah. So I can empathize, I think, with that perspective. So the two of you, you and Vadim decided to create a prototype, and then you started to get traction and I guess started to monetize it before you then went back out and raised around. Talk to me about that. How did you decide exactly what the MVP needed to be, and who were you working with in the early days that really drove that product development?
Well, initially, I think the initial money that we got in, about $500,000, was before we had any revenue. But we did have traction from people trading data, and we were able to show that people actually use the platform and like the platform, and were able to give data. And then from there, we went out and got our first couple of customers. Which, was interesting. It was, we went to two of the largest commercial real estate owners in the world, or up there, right? It's certainly two, probably, I guess the number one and number three biggest owners in New York City, and pitched them and closed both of them. And I was like, oh, this is easy. They were good sized contracts, and and so it was actually it was a false positive. I mean, it was great. It was useful as a proof point to raise off of, which we did. But then I made the mistake of thinking, oh, this is easy. We should now go hire a salesperson, and we should go do more of this. And that wasn't actually the right answer. We shouldn't have hired a salesperson. We should have then said, okay, we've proven that people are interested in this. Now let's focus more on the data. Let's continue to build it out a little more before we go to market more broadly. It was a bit of a false positive. And part of it is, I think, just because founder-led sales. And frankly, I needed to be very involved in sales on an ongoing basis. That was part of it. But also some of it was luck. Some of it was warm introductions. So I don't know. But in any event, it did help us with fundraising. It helped prove that there was a product market fit of some sort. And helped us kind of get to the next stage. So we did about $500,000. Then we simultaneously kind of got those customers. And then we did 500 Startups Accelerator in Silicon Valley. So we went out there. We lived there for about 4 months, and we raised a little bit more money while we were in that. And then, with the goal that as soon as we finished the demo day, we wanted to have a term sheet for our Series A, which we had within a month of demo day, which was great. And so then we were able to sort of be off to the races. So yeah, now that, I'm dating myself because that was a Series A in 2013. That would be called a seed round today.
Yes. Meant something very different back then. There were different criteria.
Every round has been shifted by one. So a Series A then is now a seed. A seed then would be a pre-seed now, but the term pre-seed did not exist then. So
right. Fantastic. So it sounds like you learned a lot in those early days, and I assume you're continuing to learn quite a lot as now you've spent the next dozen years continuing to expand the business. At that time, were you thinking, I'm on the VC-backed, assembly line, as it were? Am I just looking ahead to the next round, thinking about hitting the metrics? That's part of what's driving the need to hire a sales team, for example. Were you thinking, I really want to hit break even or profitability, and then, continue to have great amount of control over the business and decide where I want this to go and how I want it to fit in my life? What was your thought process?
It was always of the mindset of wanting to build a big business, build a big company, be something that was fundamentally disruptive to the industry, and be the leader in commercial real estate data. That was always sort of the end goal. So wasn't thinking a lot about profitability at that point. Maybe should have a little more, or but it was just about growth and how do we figure out how to grow this thing and keep going with it. Whether that would be my mentality today, I don't know, but that was certainly my mentality then. But look, I think that at the times in our company's history where we haven't been in growth mode, it's less exciting, and I wanted to, that's that excitement, that growth, that palpable feeling of growth is what kind of keeps me going. So I'm always trying to figure out how we can take it to the next level.
So you've maintained one focus on commercial lease comparable data. You also have done other things, and there are other aspects of the product. And you have a pretty diverse customer base that are interested, for example, even in just the lease comparable data. So as you've evolved over time, how have you decided what you're going to build, what you're not going to build, who you want as a customer, who you don't want as a customer?
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, we never intended to just be like lease comp guys, right? We wanted to be the leader in commercial real estate data. And we felt that lease comps were like a really key place to start because it was a unique data set that nobody else had. And super critical data set, right? Because the leasing data obviously is important in the day-to-day activities of getting, income for a property and doing asset management and understanding the day-to-day, but then of course drives the value of any income producing asset because you have to have income to drive the NOI, which divided by the cap rate equals the price. Mm-hmm. And that's how you value commercial real estate. So we knew that it was a critical piece of information, but also recognize that, there's data sets that are complementary, right? Like if you're trying to figure out the value of a property, you need the NOI, but you also need the cap rate. So sales comps give you cap rate if you can crowdsource sales comps. So we went into that. Obviously, you need all the property data surrounding those transactions because that gives you the context to understand why did it trade at that cap rate? Why is it getting those kind of rents? Oh, because it was built in this year and it's this many floors and it's in this location. So getting, the comprehensive property data was key. And then we've just tried to continue to build data sets around assets, right? So, and through a lens of by which we want to be able to bring in unique data sets and we want to leverage crowdsourcing wherever we can because that's our secret sauce. So we're not particularly interested in bringing in data that is commodity data because other people have it, although we will bring in some of that if it helps round out the picture. But when you think about what makes up a property, it's the leases within the property. It's the sales of that property, both current and historical. It's the property data within it. It's the loans on that property. Is it securitized? Is it in CMBS? That's valuable information to know, as well. Tax information is valuable and zoning information. And so we just have added more different data sets around it to try to make it more valuable and then created insights and analytics from the aggregation of that data too, to help you understand how a market's moving and how that's going. And then there's obviously lots of tools you can build around helping people juxtapose that data around their own data internally to help see performance of an asset against the market and things like that.
What do you think is, the top hot thing that's, selling like mad today that's really driving a lot of growth in your business and why?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It changes every day. I think that what's been very valuable to a lot of our clients lately has been data around a lot of the more kind of specialized subclasses of buildings. When we started the company, our clients were core real estate investors, and they were looking at office buildings in the biggest markets in the world. Then things changed, and people were interested in a lot of, secondary markets in the US, not just the core, the gateway markets. And then, there was an interest in going beyond just maybe office, but then there was an interest in industrial and in retail. And so it was then, a few major food groups in, primary and secondary markets. Now, particularly kind of post-COVID and with the interest rate, challenges we've had, now we're seeing our clients really trying to diversify their portfolios much more broadly than ever before. And so now they're asking us about medical office and lab space and industrial outdoor storage, which used to just be called land, and, cold storage and, people are investing in single family rentals and, build to rent and all. It's self-storage. There's a million different asset classes. And so we've been focused on trying to help people understand all these more micro, asset classes, which is a little more challenging, but we actually had a lot of that data. We just weren't necessarily categorizing it, granularly enough for them. So a big focus for us has been, how do we present this in a way that makes it easy for them to understand a lot of those, asset classes. So yeah, we've also seen interesting growth in the government space, tax assessors leveraging our data, tax appeal firms then using our data to contest those taxes. That was a space we never really thought that much about at the beginning, and it turns out that it's been a growth area for us. Originally, actually, I told our sales team they weren't allowed to do those deals because I didn't want to upset our clients who were the owners. And then I found out that every other real estate data provider was selling to these guys, and we weren't. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be the only one who doesn't when we have the best data for them to assess taxes on. Like, so yeah.
Might as well help them out then.
Yeah.
Yeah, to play some of that first part back to you, I think we see this a lot at Fifth Dimension as well, that the economic conditions, right, drive a need for the diversification of a lot of portfolios on the acquisition side. And then as that plays out in asset management. And so, suddenly you might have a specialism within that, maybe you're WP Carey looking at net leases, but you'll literally buy all of the exact type of lease that you can find from Poland to California in one big bundle, frankly, if you could, right? Yeah. And you then have to think about exactly which data you're interested in, how you're going to build a product and a UIX that accommodates for people who are doing such diverse things. Mm-hmm. As your product and the way that people look at it, the way that people interact with it, the way it feels has evolved over time. How do you think it speaks to users? How do you think about creating something that's easy to use, that people love being in it, and still you're trading data, right? At the end of the day, you're hoping that's being used for decision making.
Well, I think that it's an interesting challenge because everybody wants something that's super easy to use. But sometimes that is in conflict with being a, kind of power tool. Mm-hmm. And you have to kind of toe that line of how do you try to make something that everybody can use, but that for your power users who are your most active users and your your biggest champions, that you allow them to do everything in the kind of detail that they want. And that's an ongoing struggle. I don't have the perfect answer to it. I think that it's a matter of having some level of intuition of how they want to see the data and trying to, anticipate that and present it in a way that's simple and, focusing on both of those things at the same time, doing a lot of user testing and getting feedback, getting to sort of the AI topic, obviously, agentic search and, being able to just type something into a search bar and get results that are, could be a quick summary at the top and then more granular underneath and provide, is valuable. And I think that it does sort of toe that line a bit. And we've been, so integrating those kind of technologies and thinking about also how do you integrate the charts and graphs and data that our customers want and need with it, right? Because our customers don't want answers with a black box supporting it. Mm-hmm. It is very important to them to have the granular data supporting those answers. And so we're trying to figure out how to do both.
Yeah, absolutely. We find the same sort of friction, I think is the right way of putting it, where you want to build something that is as like other tools that people use in a sense as possible, because that's part of what drives ease, is not only simplicity, something being pared back, but also hey, I've used ChatGPT. So if I put something in front of you that looks just a little bit like ChatGPT or a text message or a WhatsApp, that it's going to reduce the friction in that person thinking, hey, this is going to become a day-to-day part of my life. I want to use this. It's easy. It makes sense to me. At the same time that you're talking about in our business, things like automating end-to-end your deal flow from how you do prospecting and you identify off-market opportunities by looking at earnings calls and thinking about stuff that might be sold soon for particular reasons, all the way through underwriting, due diligence, and managing onboarding of that asset. And you go through a lot of different teams there too, right? Part of what you're saying is but the end user is a few different types of end users.
Yes.
And those data, sometimes you want an executive summary, but also if you're in an investment committee meeting, you want to be able to cite the census data that you used in your market analysis to defend the position for this particular lease, as the case might be. So yeah, I think it is a useful friction. One way I think about it, of course, is what are businesses like mine doing? What do I like about what they're doing? What do I not like? I'm interested in how you view your place in the marketplace with other data providers, data purveyors. And, as you know, we had LD of Cherry on the podcast, and I don't know if he would subscribe to this definition, but I think of that as being data warehouse in a box for your enterprise business. Or you have obviously the co-stars of the world. There are a lot of players who drive their business value by playing in commercial real estate data. What's your place? What do you want it to be?
So we're trying to bring transparency into commercial real estate data, through really granular data that's extremely hard to come by otherwise. We want people to be able to say that when you come to CompStak, you're getting something you can't get anywhere else. You're getting a level of insight you can't get anywhere else, a level of granularity you can't get anywhere else, and that it's high quality. We are, I hear or see other data providers brag about how many data points they have. You will never see us do that, right? And in fact, when a prospect comes to us and says, well, so-and-so says they have X and you only have Y. And we're like, let me tell you why you are evaluating us in the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So you can either evaluate us in the right way or you're not going to be the right fit for us, because we are not going to give you the most crappy data points. We're going to give you high quality ones in a lower volume, that you can truly rely on and make decisions off of. That's how I want it to be thought about, in the market.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like trust is a really big part of your brand.
Oh, 100%. And when we go and pitch a client, right, they're always inherently skeptical because their data is crowdsourced. And people are like, oh, crowdsourced data, you could just be getting whatever garbage. We say, try us. Give us an address of one of your properties. Give us the name of a tenant of a lease you just signed. Let's put it into CompStak and let's see how the data looks. And you tell us if it's good quality. And we pass that test most of the time, almost all the time, because we really, really care about high quality and making sure the data is right. And we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. And if it's not right, we say, okay, we're sorry, it's not right. Let's try some more data. Let's see if that's right. If you still aren't convinced, we'll come back to you in a year, and we'll see what you think then.
Yeah, it's a powerful demonstration. It's funny, I'm not going to name names, but I was at a prominent real estate business right before coming here. And I was asking them about how they think about internal benchmarking when they're doing underwriting and DD on a potential acquisition versus different types of market data, right? Because everyone has an opinion. They're like, oh yeah, we only read the new mark analysis, not the CBRE one for reasons, et cetera. And they were like, look, every time CoStar calls us and asks us for data, I just lie to them and I give them wrong data because we've been doing this longer. We have a particular, type of asset that we're interested in, and I don't want them to have access to those data. And in that way, actually, crowdsourcing is the better option, right? You are asking a different set of people with different incentives, different vested interests, right, in providing those data so that you would then verify them via networks, via community, rather than an individual player who might have good or bad reasons, I think, for wanting to participate in that data ecosystem. So I get the skepticism, but I, of course, think there are other arguments there about why those data might, in fact, be better. Right.
And we've actually built this gamified system by which our members earn credits for sharing data, and they use those credits to get other data back out. And the way that those credits are awarded is based off of the uniqueness of the data, the accuracy of the data, which we score in lots of different ways. And, you can lose credits if you've given data to us that's we found to be incorrect, and you can get kicked off the system if you're gaming the system or trying intentionally, which almost never happens. So whereas, I won't name names, but at other data providers asking you for data, they're not offering you anything in return.
Exactly.
And so there's no incentive. Why am I going to give you good data? What are you going to give me? Right. And so I think that was very important to our system, is we needed to make it clear that you're getting value, for what you give us. And also it's free to those who trade, right? If you're a broker, a fee appraiser, or a researcher in a brokerage firm, you can give data to CompStak and get data out for free. We're not just asking you to give us data and then charging you a bunch of money to get data back out. And that was key to the value prop. And part of that was just the fact that I was a broker. I resented people asking me for data and then charging for it. And I also recognize the fact that it's not easy to get money from brokers. So there's better channels better people to go to talk to get you to write you a check than a broker, unfortunately.
Yes, very true. That's why we at Fifth Dimension do not focus on selling to brokers ourselves. Certainly one of the reasons. Anyway, so in terms of PropTech, you mentioned how that wasn't really a thing when you first started this business. It's become a very big thing, of course, as you know, and you've participated in some of the investment ecosystem there too. And a lot of those businesses have not been historically great successes. I am lucky to have both some PropTech specific investors on board, as well as some more generalist VC funds, and those focus specifically on AI. But if you go to one of their websites and you click through their portfolio companies, if you filter them by property technology, most of them are dead websites, right? And this is sort of a known and talked about thing, partially because you might say there are a lot of reasons, but it's difficult to sell to real estate, whether you're selling to brokers, and maybe that's a high volume, low margin game in some sense, or maybe because you're selling to large enterprise businesses that take 10 years to adopt the newest product that Microsoft is trying to sell them, even though they've only ever bought Microsoft products. And it's really a very small incremental change. So what makes CompStak, have staying power? You've already been around for a long time. And how do you think the appetite for property technology might be changing?
Fair question. I think, one thing that benefits us is that we're a data company, and data companies are hard to start and hard to grow. But once you have lots of really valuable data that is proprietary, why should somebody go somewhere else to get that, to go to someone who has less of that data, right? And every day as the database grows, it becomes more valuable. And so we build a nice competitive moat there with that data. And because, of course, on the exchange side, it's free, it's hard for other people to sort of, directly compete in that regard. And so that helps us grow and have staying power, I would say. And it's, it's network effects at the end of the day in that regard. I think, the reason why probably a lot of companies have failed in the space is at least in part maybe because PropTech became hot, very quickly. And as it did, a lot of people got into the space who maybe weren't the right fit to have started companies in the space. I think in particular, from what I've seen, I haven't done a study on this, although I'd be interested to look at success rates for PropTech companies where the founders come from the real estate industry versus those that don't. Mm-hmm. In my experience, I've seen people, start companies in this space who come in with a thesis that if they had worked in the industry, they wouldn't view it the same way. Like, I knew as a broker that selling into brokers is a really tough business and a shitty value prop, and I needed to find a different way to make money. Yep. I've seen a ton of companies that have come along and they're like, well, there's hundreds of thousands of brokers. They're the biggest group in commercial real estate. Obviously, those are the people you want to sell to. Mm-hmm. And they just think that that's the case. And that, from the outside looking in, that may look like the case. But if you're actually in the industry, you realize just how challenging that is. And, you can spin, your wheels and go through a lot of cycles before you reach that conclusion on your own.
Yeah, I agree with that. And even taking it down one level, we've seen this play out in our commercial team, where the most successful commercial leaders in the business tend to have at least 5, maybe more like 10 years of experience in real estate before they went and decided to jump to the property technology side, because that deep familiarity with the pain point that you're solving. And then you can map onto that the ability to say, great, like, here's this solution and here's what I've learned actually works to help with this problem you have is wonderful. If you have the experience, you can trot out examples, right? Like, oh yeah, and when I was on this, an asset management team, I was working in my early days as an analyst, and I had to take these data out of Argus, and it's this 1,500 row spreadsheet. It was killer every time. I hated it. Wait, you have a solution for that? And you can sort of bond, you can develop that rapport, and you can really effectively, I think, create trust. Goes back to that, right? And so I agree, a lot of those businesses that I've seen fall by the wayside don't have that. I think additionally—
But by the way, that's a mistake that that we've made repeatedly. Really? And it took me a long time to sort of reach a very similar conclusion. I having been a broker, I was skeptical of hiring brokers, and brokers are the most obvious sort of salespeople from real estate. But I was like, but brokers aren't process oriented. And brokers are running deals, not just selling. And I wanted to, do predictable revenue. And so I wanted to hire salespeople that were really process oriented and knew how to sell tech and knew how to sell data. And I actually was inclined to not hire people from the industry because I thought they wouldn't have the same discipline in sales and I could teach them real estate. And now I've sort of swung the other direction a bit because there's a lot to be said for being able to speak to and really inherently understand the customer deeply. And when you sell into very sophisticated clients, that's challenging. So we found that either we hire people who aren't from real estate And it just takes them a long time to get that learning curve done. Once they do, they can be very successful if they're good salespeople, but it takes a while. Or if we hire from people from the industry, they can get ramped up faster, and we need to calibrate our thinking appropriately. But anyway, I think you probably learned it earlier than I did, unfortunately.
Yeah, also the hard way. But I think relatively quick feedback, if you have someone who gets asked a detailed question about restrictive covenants in triple net leases, and they're just like, well, but that was a lot of words I didn't understand, right? And sure, that's an overly simplified kind of example, but I believe part of what you're saying is that real estate people, the way in which they make money, whether you're a broker, whether you're a private equity shop, acquiring and managing a bunch of assets, is by sniffing out bullshit. Like very specifically, right? Like your job as a real estate professional is to figure out what's true, what isn't, in a gut feel, experience-based way really quickly. And so I think people have just an immediate visceral negative reaction to someone who doesn't kind of speak their language.
Totally.
So yeah, that's been a learning. What are some of your other biggest learnings over the course of your time building CompStak?
It's a broad question. It's been, I mean, there's constant learnings, I think.
What about the most painful ones? Give me something that, really like you've been on a journey with.
Good question. I would certainly say like, on the sales side, that's part of it. I think that, one thing that's always been an ongoing challenge, it's maybe a more broad topic, is, trying to outsmart problems generally. I think when you hire tech people, every tech person wants to try to outsmart a problem instead of outwork it. And I think that you go through cycles in that. I mean, we have, for the most part, I think big reason for our survival is, for the most part, we've realized when we're trying to outsmart something and we haven't succeeded, and we decide, no, we're just going to do it the hard way and grit it out. But I think that particularly some hard lessons in some of the earlier days, where it's like, okay, this new product idea didn't work, let's try this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. And it's like, well, if we would have just spent that time just putting in twice as much effort in the thing that was working, shooting more lead bullets rather than trying to find the silver bullet, that, would have been time better spent. I don't begrudge people trying to outsmart the problem, because sometimes you do. But, it's always a challenging, balance to try to figure out when you should try to do that and when you shouldn't. But I would say rarely can you fix a problem with product.
And yet we both run product businesses.
Well, you know what? I think you can fundamentally figure out the answer to that product through conversations and go to market, and then build the product to go with the problem you're solving, rather than sort of building the product and then trying to see if it solves the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we both have been building businesses where we spent a lot of time in a, semi-bootstrapping phase, making sure I have experience in real estate, building a real estate investment trust portfolio at a previous PropTech business. But you have to decide there's a there. And as you mentioned, a lot of early stage businesses are just, hey, what's the sexy new technology? And how can I fit this to the world's largest asset class? That generally,
right,
as a way of building a business, I think doesn't work out.
Totally. Yeah.
So what's some of the kind of best insights that you think you've gotten from your existing client base, where you've had an aha moment and you're like, oh, I now think about the way I'm going to build CompStak differently?
Fair. I think, we get those a lot. I mean, just like areas that I didn't even know existed. So we have like a major, hospital owner that's a client who reached out to us for, and we don't sell into corporate real estate a lot. And this was like, effectively a corporate real estate for a hospital that owns a lot of locations. And turns out there's something called the Stark Law, which says that if you are a owner of a hospital, that you have to rent out space. If you rent out space within your hospital to other doctors, you have to do it at market rent, because there can't be any conflict of interest there, by which they pay you a premium rent and they get premium referrals from you, particularly as it relates to like Medicare and Medicaid patients, right? And so they need to be able to prove to the government that they are charging a fair market rent. And it's like, no idea that was a market for us, and just discovered it from an inbound from a hospital, for instance. Similarly, we sell into a major jurisdiction that uses us for a commercial rent tax, and it's like, I didn't know the city had a commercial rent tax, and then they use us to assess that commercial rent tax and figure out who's not paying the right amount of taxes on their rent. So yeah, a lot of times you just get these sort of inquiries that result in interesting learnings that maybe you wouldn't see, I guess. And there seems to be, new ones every day.
Yeah, I love real estate because it is such a deep and broad industry that every day definitely feels like a school day. And talking, for example, with retail clients, and we're not a point solution based business. We're a systems business, a workflow automation business, and taking things from cradle to grave. So, if you just want to do lease extraction, please go to one of these other, 30 businesses today funded by YC or, at Series A stage and do that. However, within retail, leases are a particular problem, right? They're an absolutely complex nightmare where actually these point solutions don't solve the fact that there are, restrictive covenants that say like checkers can only exist in locations that have parking lots with, at least 55 or more, parking spaces. And you'll not ever be able to get those data out of the underlying documents from a solution that isn't sort of more agile and more bespoke. And so every time I get into a deep conversation about this, I'm like, oh, wow. Like I understand a little bit more. I empathize a little bit more with people who've only gone deep on this single problem because you can go so deep.
Right. Totally.
But there's so much of real estate, that there is value to be captured in. So in thinking about the next 10 years of your business, where are we going to head to? Do you think today even that real estate is less paper-based than it was when you started CompStak?
Absolutely. I remember in early days literally having people mail us comps. That has not happened in a long time.
I was going to say, people still ask if they can fax us invoices.
Do they
I'm like,
really?
Sure, yeah.
Well, that hasn't
Thanks,
happened.
Missouri or whatever.
At one point, we did have like an e-fax number, but I don't think we have it anymore. Luckily, we've not seen that much.
Now I'm just like, take a picture and send it to me via email, right? So like, usually they have an iPhone still, even though they also want to send us data by fax. But yes. I digress.
Yeah. Like I said, we want to be the leader in commercial real estate data. So what it's really been all about for us is like, how do we build a complete picture? Because it's kind of a mindset that, 1 + 1 = 3, right? It's like, being able to look at, for instance, an office building and know when it last sold, at what cap rate, what are the rents in the building for the office, but then also what's the rent in for the retail, and how does that help you underwrite it? So that's, just continuing to add new data to help people round out the picture. But then also, we've been doing a lot more with our clients by way of helping them integrate our data with their data. A lot more clients are doing a better job of making sense of their own data, and we're trying to help them in that regard as well. And but also, showing them that like, you need that market context, in relation to your internal data to understand where we are. And so sometimes it's a matter of, okay, can we bring their data into CompStak so they can look in, like, we have a new portfolios tool where you can see the performance of your portfolio. You can actually benchmark it against, your peers in the industry and see how they're performing with similar assets as compared to you. You can look at the exposure risk within your competitors and within your own portfolio of, where do you have rents that are above or below market with upcoming lease expirations and things like that. And so a lot more on the asset management side, a lot more on the analytics side, helping people bring their data to ours and vice versa. And benchmarking is always an area of focus. I think particularly in the asset management side, it's like, you've got an asset manager who says, oh yeah, for this building, we're going to get average rents this year of $50 a foot. And then at the end of the year, they say, look, we got $51 a foot. We beat our budget. Aren't we great? And it's like, but they're not telling you that their peers for similar buildings were getting $60 a foot and they're actually underperforming. So helping, that level of transparency keeps everybody honest, and so we're helping LPs get more exposure to that when they don't get as much of that from their GPs. And we're helping the GPs, get better accountability for their teams internally and helping everybody better contextualize, their data.
That's an exciting world. I would like to live in that world. So I'm bought into that future. On the topic of AI, automation, and change, I mean, generally in real estate businesses, do you think that, let's say, the way that people hire is going to change? The actual jobs that asset managers, for example, do, what are they going to be doing more or less of as a result of adopting more data-driven technologies, machine learning-based technologies? How is that going to change the way they make money and the way they think about building their businesses, do you think?
Well, fundamentally, I don't think people are adopting AI technologies or ML technologies. I think people are just going to adopt technologies, and all technologies are going to, have a lot of AI as we think about it today deeply embedded in them, or those companies are going to cease to exist. I think about it, in the late 90s saying, oh, we're going to, do this thing on the internet. And it's like, no, every company's on the internet. You're not building the internet thing. It's embedded in what you do, right? And I think that AI, as we think about it today, and agents and LLMs are going to be embedded in everything. And I do think it already is fundamentally changing, the industry. I wonder the most about the impact to junior level people in the industry, because I think that a lot of that analyst work you can now sub out to an agent, and you don't need an analyst to, analyze numbers in the same way and work with data necessarily in the same way. And so it's empowering to more senior people. But for more junior people, I don't know that they're needed as much as they were. And then, of course, the question is, well, all those senior people became senior people by having learned as junior people. So how do you build the next, generation of real estate leaders if they're no longer being hired at the junior level? I think that perhaps it means that there's going to need to be a greater emphasis on real estate education. More people will be getting masters in real estate or learning in classrooms, the same way that, you can do everything in Excel and in a calculator, but you still learn math as a kid the hard way, right? I think that maybe they'll still have to learn those skills, but they'll have to learn them. They'll have to pay to learn those skills in jobs instead of being paid to learn them on the job.
That's interesting. Yeah, we think a lot about this, of course, at the businesses that we work with. And one of the things that we advise is leaning heavily into investigating the reasoning that's outputted by our tool. And so we, depending on the client, because we have all of these data ourselves, can print the step-by-step reasoning our AI agent has gone through to populate every cell in a cash flow model, for example. And it literally starts with today's date is X. This relates to the dates and these underlying assumptions in these ways, and then goes on down from there. And One of the things that I think about in training up junior people and running graduate schemes is well, okay, sure, you can learn from first principles how to calculate WALT and when it's leveraged and unleveraged, what you should be thinking about, how to think about IRR risk sensitivity. But actually, one of the ways in which you can also learn how to do that is by checking someone else's work, right? You can't effectively say, oh, cool, I need to look at mark-to-market properties. I have to know what that means from a WALT perspective, right? And then pass them through due diligence. If I don't understand, right, whether an NOI calculation then is matching the assumptions of my business thesis, I care about, only movements in the negative of greater than 6.7%, I'm never going to be able to understand the output of a tool. And so I think there's ways in which you can leverage, almost have a conversation with the AI about how it got where it got, and that becomes a teaching experience in and of itself. So I'm excited about thinking how to productize that in the future, right? And there are a lot of businesses that specifically, right, are just doing AI agents for education. What's the version of that in real estate where maybe it is a master's program, but maybe it's, taught by an AI agent?
That's fair. I mean, that can be the way to do it. Yeah, I think absolutely. I would certainly think that anybody trying to learn should leverage that to try to, as a means to make it happen. I don't know. I guess we'll see how it all plays out. Have you seen examples where you've heard about firms that have decreased the number of analysts they're hiring explicitly because of AI, or have given you that feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes we're brought in at a decision-making point where they're deciding to hire X number more analysts or hire an AI, and they choose to hire agentelly instead, or people don't go and backfill for positions when teams leave now that they have a really powerful workflow automation engine at their fingertips. But as you say, like, I think what that means to me is that suddenly everyone in your business becomes a decision maker. And I'm sort of interested in what the long-term ramifications of that are. So what I see happening already at 6 months, 12 months in, is suddenly these analysts, doesn't matter what you call them now, are sitting in on more investment committee meetings because they have more to say, right? Like they're more engaged in a deeper way and more meaningful way with the analysis that's gone into that investment committee memo because they have had to pull it together alongside an AI agent that actually really knows what it's talking about. And we offer things like, hey, what if you were to draft the same investment committee memo in a really bullish way and a really bearish way? Use different market data, use different internal benchmarking from the performance of past portfolios with the same asset type, and make, a completely different argument. And that prepares people to walk into an investment committee meeting suddenly in a completely novel way. So I think, yes, it's definitely going to replace jobs. What I like to believe the future is, which is already true in real estate, right, is that means that everyone almost has their own mini empire in their business. That's exciting to me.
Yeah. That's very cool. I mean, I think the other interesting thing though that I think about is like all these people have access to the same data and the same tools. So how do you reach a different novel conclusion than those other people? I think that what it comes down to when there's broader transparency and access to data is that then what sort of wins the day is creativity. And some of that creativity, though, is born from experience. So it'll be interesting to see whether maybe if those junior people are in the meeting presenting that data, if they can bring to bear the experience, the creativity that comes with experience. Maybe they bring to bear creativity that comes from lack of experience that makes them see the world in a different way. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Yeah,
I agree. I think both are valid and interesting in different ways. And that's one of the things we talk about a lot as well, is when you are, for example, continuing the same line of thought, making an investment committee decision, you're not just drawing on the 5, 7, 15 years you've spent at your current business. You had a career before that. And maybe those data aren't contained in the data set that you can cite here, or they're not contained in your analysis, but you're making a decision based on that experience. Does this pass the sniff test or not? Does this look like something that has been successful to me in the past or not? And that's also where I get, continually excited about the human AI collaboration potential, because then you can also feed that back and try and systematize that as part of the learning of that data set. But to answer your original question, though, like, no one has access to the same data set, right? Like, it might be a world that we're interested in heading towards, but I think the fact is we're all generating more data all the time. And there's a potential universe in which actually your data set is ever more personalized to you, ever more bespoke. And it's not just the way in which the data are presented, right? If I'm thinking about, I'm going to track how my assets that I've invested in have performed across the, 10 different places that I've invested in. And I've created mini-me, like mini-Kate is going to help me decide whether or not I'm going to, short the S&P 500 on this day 10 years from now. She's going to make decisions in a particular way, right?
Sure.
And I think it raises a lot of questions about data ownership, which I'm really interested in the future as well.
Sure.
So are those data yours? Are those data, the people who are sharing them? Are they complicated questions, right? Especially if you have an AI recording everything you say all day.
Absolutely. What is fair use, right?
Exactly. So if you could leave our audience with one insight about building a business in real estate or about the kinds of people that you work with, what do you want to leave them with?
I would say, kind of speaking to the earlier topic, like I think that, are we talking about building a business maybe in tech or in real estate generally? I guess actually, let me ask you that.
Either one.
Okay. Well, I would say in the PropTech space, it's all about domain expertise. I would come back to that. And what do you really know about this industry that is maybe not obvious to everyone else, but that you just inherently understand, and don't let anybody tell you that you're wrong if you really believe it and you inherently have experienced it. And if you are thinking about getting to this space and you don't have that, maybe find a partner who does. And broadly in the real estate industry, I would say, for all of our clients or prospective clients or anyone like that, I it's all about the data, and obviously I'm self-serving in saying that, but we're a data company. I truly believe that, it should be everyone's top priority, make sense of their data. I think that, as we talk about AI, there's lots of tools out there that help you make decisions, but if they're driven by incomplete data or crappy data, you will get an incomplete or crappy result. So you really need to focus on, how do you make sense of your own data? How do you make sense of market data? And how do you leverage that to make good decisions? And certainly everybody else is doing it. So it's a liability, frankly, and a competitive disadvantage for anyone who doesn't. So that would be my words of wisdom, if I can offer them, to, people in the real estate space, of which I actually worked in the real estate space for 5.5 years. So I'm not all that qualified, but, I'll do the best I can.
So better data means better decision making. Get with the program or don't get left behind, right? So I feel similarly about AI. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michael. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Sure.
And look forward to hearing more from you and CompStak in the future.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. This was fun.
Cheers.